Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. I was already done. The kind of done that leaves you staring at your desk, willing the clock to move faster, knowing you've crossed the finish line of yet another insane workday. Projects to review, meetings to sit through, my boss breathing down my neck about deadlines that felt impossible to meet. But that's what this job is, a grind. I live for it. But damn, today was too much. I had just pulled my jacket on, gearing up to leave the office, when my phone buzzed in my hand. It was from my sister Leah. I didn't even have to open the message to feel my stomach drop. I knew what it was before I saw the photo. My mom, sitting alone on a park bench. The image was grainy, a dark, cloudy sky hanging above her. She looked lost, her back hunched under a worn-out coat, her hands gripping her purse like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. She wasn't crying, wasn't screaming, just waiting. Her eyes were distant. She looked resigned. I stared at the photo for a beat, my pulse quickening. Then I opened the message. They dropped her off there. They said she has to figure it out. What the hell? I hit reply instantly. Where are they now? No response for a moment, but I didn't care. My mind was already spiraling. This wasn't just another one of my parents' emotionally distant moments. They'd done this before, left her to fend for herself, made her feel small. But this felt like a final line crossed. I wasn't sure how long I sat there, staring at the phone, trying to wrap my mind around what I'd just read. My parents, the people who'd always pushed her to the side when it was convenient for them, had finally done it. They had truly left her out there, alone. My chest tightened with a mix of disbelief and an anger I hadn't felt in years. They'd abandoned her, and I'd be damned if I'd let that slide. I threw my jacket back on and grabbed my keys. The drive home was a blur, my hands tight on the wheel. I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. I wasn't letting this go. Not this time. I slammed the door to my apartment behind me, pacing the living room. I thought about just picking her up, taking her home, and trying to patch things up quietly. But that wasn't going to cut it anymore. Not after everything. I pulled up my contacts and sent a text to a few people I trusted. A lawyer friend, a planner, an architect or two. People who understood power, who could be counted on in a moment like this. No questions. Need help with something. This is serious. Let's talk. The responses came back almost immediately. Everyone was in. A sense of relief spread through me, something like certainty. I wasn't alone in this. I exhaled deeply. This wasn't about my mother or father anymore. It was about making them see, forcing them to confront the mess they'd made. The longer I stood there, fuming, the more the anger twisted inside me. It was like a knot I couldn't undo. The image of my mother, alone on that bench, replayed in my mind, over and over. But as the heat in my chest built, I thought about the bigger picture, about how things had always been this way. I didn't grow up with parents who made me feel seen. My mom, when she was around, was always busy with work, meetings, calls, events. She had her career, her social circle. She was a name on a business card, not a mother. My dad? He was in his own world, wrapped up in hobbies, his books, his garden, anything that kept him distracted. They had no real emotional connection to each other or to me. They'd say the right things when it counted, but I learned pretty early on to stop expecting more than that. But there was always Grandma. She was the one who raised me, the one who cooked for me, who rubbed my back when I cried about school or when the world felt too big. Grandma was the only one who seemed to care. And maybe that's why, when I was old enough to understand, it hit me so hard that she wasn't getting the care she deserved. I remember the first time I tried to step in, when Grandma's knees were starting to give out, when she couldn't make it up the stairs as easily. I was about 15, maybe 16. I had my driver's license, and I started running errands for her, helping her with the groceries, making sure she wasn't alone for too long. I'd ask my mom if we could get someone to help, or if maybe she could do more. She'd brush it off. She's fine, I've got things to do. Don't interfere. I was so naive back then. I thought if I just kept trying, kept pushing, they'd see. They'd see what Grandma needed. But I was wrong. Every time I offered, every time I insisted, it was like I was an inconvenience. My mom's eyes would narrow, and she'd get this cold, distant look, like she resented the fact that I was even bringing it up. She'd tell me to stop interfering. Let your grandmother live her life, she'd say, as if she were already beyond the point of needing help, as if she'd somehow earned her solitude. It wasn't just my mom. My dad, even when he wasn't busy, never cared enough to notice. Maybe he thought my mom had it all under control, but I knew she didn't. And the fact that he didn't step in, that he didn't even care enough to see it, that only made things worse. I tried to keep the peace, to respect their decisions, but the resentment built. Every time I'd call for help, every time I'd offer to pick up the slack, they'd shut me down. It wasn't until I left for college that it really hit me how bad it had gotten. I couldn't be there all the time. I couldn't fix everything, no matter how hard I tried. And now they'd crossed a line. I'd been loyal to them for so long, trying to make up for their shortcomings. But at what cost? Grandma had been there for me when I had no one else. She taught me what love looked like: unconditional, steady, the kind of love that doesn't ask for anything in return. I'd been holding on to the idea that one day things might get better with my parents, that they might wake up and realize what they were missing. But this was unforgivable. I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. I wasn't going to let them get away with abandoning Grandma. I couldn't pretend anymore that they had my loyalty, not when I knew where it needed to be, no more. I paced back and forth in my living room, the phone buzzing again, Leah's texts pouring in. Each one confirmed the worst. My parents had dropped my mother off at that park bench like she was some kind of burden they'd finally had enough of. No explanations, no excuses, just a cold dismissal. I stood there, frozen for a moment, considering my options. I could just drive over, pick her up, and smooth things over quietly. No drama, no confrontation. It felt like the easy way out. It felt like the way I always tried to handle things with them: calm, controlled, the adult thing to do. But something inside me pushed back. As I stood there, the anger slowly boiling under my skin, the memories came flooding back. All those times I'd tried to intervene when Grandma needed help, when my mom barely looked up from her phone to check on her. Every time I'd asked for more, I'd been met with cold distance. "She's fine," my mom would say. "She's tough. Let her handle it." My dad, silent as usual, hadn't done a damn thing. They had both retreated into their own worlds, abandoning any sense of responsibility. And now, they'd gone and done it. Left her like trash on a park bench. Number. I wasn't going to fix this quietly. I wasn't going to play the role of the good daughter who tiptoed around their mess. I grabbed my phone, already knowing who I needed to reach out to. I didn't need just anyone. I needed people who could think on their feet, who could get things done with precision and authority. People I trusted. I quickly pulled up a group text with a few friends, professionals who could help me make this moment count. Jason, the lawyer, Marissa, the architect, and Zoe, another city planner. I typed the message fast, my fingers tapping out the words before I could second-guess myself. No questions. Need help with a mission. This is serious. If you're in, just respond. I hit send, then stared at the screen for a moment, heart racing. It was done now. I couldn't take it back. Within seconds, the replies started coming in, each one immediate, each one confirming that they were on board. "Count me in," Jason texted. "What are we doing?" "I'm in," Zoe wrote. "Tell me when and where." Marissa's reply was simple but direct. "I'm in. Let's do this." A rush of resolve hit me, as if the weight of what I'd been holding finally settled into place. This wasn't just about picking up my mom and taking her home. This was about making my parents face the truth of their actions. This was about making them see the consequences of what they had done, forcing them to realize that they couldn't just treat people like this anymore. Not my mom, not my grandma, not anyone. I sat down on the edge of the couch, letting out a slow breath. I wasn't alone in this. I had a team. People who would help me, who would have my back as I made sure my parents faced the fallout of their coldness. But it wasn't just about the immediate drama. It was about something bigger, about the years of neglect, the years of watching my mother treat Grandma as an afterthought, and me standing by, too afraid to push harder, too afraid to upset the fragile balance that was our family. Not anymore. This wasn't going to be swept under the rug. My parents would understand exactly what their actions meant, and they would answer for it. No more pretending everything was fine. I couldn't be silent any longer. I texted back a quick message to the group: "Meet at my place in an hour. I'll brief everyone then." The plan was forming, and it was going to be calculated, calm but impactful. I wasn't going to back down. And I wasn't going to let them think they could get away with this, and not this time. An hour later, I stood in the parking lot of a nearby business complex, my breath visible in the cold evening air. I texted the team to meet here. It was neutral ground, no need to bring them to my apartment or anywhere too personal. The rented SUVs were parked nearby, the engines quietly idling. Jason was leaning against one of them, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the lot. Marissa and Zoe were standing by the other, heads down, already going over notes. Nobody said much at first. There wasn't any need for small talk. We all knew why we were here. I walked up to them, my heels clicking on the pavement, the sound sharper than usual. My mind was clear now, focused. There was no room for hesitation. "We're not here to make threats or cause a scene," I said, my voice firm. "This isn't about violence. It's about making my parents see the consequences of what they did. This is about them realizing that you don't treat family like this and just walk away." Jason nodded, pushing off the SUV. "So, what's the plan?" I let out a breath, gathering my thoughts for a moment. "We'll approach it methodically. The last thing I want is any kind of confrontation. No shouting, no chaos. This is about making sure my parents see exactly how big this is. We're not just picking her up and walking away. We're making them understand." "Got it," Zoe said, adjusting the strap of her bag. "No drama, just impact." I nodded. "Exactly. We'll show up, make sure they see us. We're not going in quietly. We want them to feel the weight of it." Marissa spoke up next, flipping through a folder she'd brought. "When we get to your parents' house, we'll park at the curb. You go to the door, do your thing, but we'll be there to back you up. Visible, but not in their face. They'll know we're not playing games." I liked that. Having the team present without crowding me, making sure it was clear we weren't alone in this. We weren't a mob, we were a message. "And the moment we move her," I said, "that's when the real weight hits. When we leave with her, my parents are going to feel the finality of this. It's not something they can sweep under the rug. It's going to follow them. And I want the neighbors to see that. I want them to understand what they've done." Jason nodded again, more serious now. "We'll make sure no one misses it." I looked around at them, my team, the people I trusted to help make sure this went the way I needed it to. This is the only chance they're going to get. I don't care about the drama or their excuses anymore. They're going to answer for what they've done. Let's make it count. With that, we split off to our vehicles. Jason and Marissa got in one. Zoe and I climbed into the other. As I settled into the driver's seat, I glanced at myself in the rearview mirror. There was no hesitation now. No second guessing. This wasn't about anger, not anymore. This was about authority. I had to look like I was in control of the situation, not someone emotionally overwhelmed by it. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, sharp, tailored, a blazer, fitted and professional, dress pants. Nothing too flashy, but enough to communicate that I was here for business. I didn't want my parents to see me as anything other than an equal, someone who had power and would wield it if necessary. My appearance had to match the message. Zoe adjusted her seat in the passenger side. "You ready?" I turned the key in the ignition, the engine purring to life. "I am." We pulled out of the parking lot, heading towards my parents' house. There was a certain stillness in the air, like everything was waiting for something. I could feel the weight of it, the tension coiling inside me. I wasn't scared. I wasn't nervous. This was the moment that I had been building towards, the one that would force them to face everything they'd been avoiding. As we drove through the dark streets, I made sure to review the plan in my head. The approach would be direct but not aggressive. I would walk up to the door, ring the bell, and say exactly what needed to be said. No excuses, no small talk. I wasn't going to let them off easy, and I wasn't going to back down. We were almost there. I could see the streetlights illuminating my parents' house in the distance, the familiar shape of it looming ahead. I felt the fire inside me, sharp and steady. This was going to change everything. We turned the corner, and the park came into view. A small patch of green, barely enough to call a park, just a few blocks from that coffee shop my mom and I used to visit together on lazy Sunday mornings. I hadn't been back here in years. The trees were bare now, their branches stretched like brittle fingers against the gray sky. I parked a block away, keeping the cars out of sight. The last thing I wanted was to make my mother feel like she was the center of a circus. It wasn't about her being the spectacle. It was about making sure she was seen. I stepped out of the car, adjusting the collar of my blazer. The heels of my shoes clicked sharply against the pavement, echoing through the otherwise quiet street. Marissa and Zoe followed me, keeping a careful distance behind, like silent reinforcements. I could hear the soft murmur of their voices, but I didn't pay attention to them. My focus was on the park up ahead. When we reached the entrance, I saw her. My mother, still sitting there, exactly like in the photo, her thin frame hunched under that old coat. She looked out of place, as if the world had just forgotten her. The wind had picked up, and she hadn't moved at all, didn't even seem to acknowledge the cold. For a second, I just stared at her, my throat tightening. This was the woman who raised me, the one who never had time for me, the one who never saw me for who I was. But still, I couldn't help but feel the sharp sting of betrayal of seeing her like this. I didn't know if I wanted to scream or just walk up to her and pull her into my arms. But I kept walking, taking slow, deliberate steps toward her. She didn't move when she saw me, didn't even stand up, just lifted her eyes, her face empty, almost resigned. There was no relief in her gaze, no recognition, no joy. Just the same blank stare she always gave me when she didn't want to deal with anything. I reached her side and draped the coat I'd been holding around her shoulders. It wasn't much, but at least it was something. I handed her the cup of coffee I'd brought, steam curling up from the top. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice steady, "are you ready to leave?" She looked down at the coffee, then back at me. Her lips parted like she was going to say something, but she hesitated, the words caught in her throat. Finally, she whispered, "I'm fine." I didn't believe her, not for a second. I knelt down in front of her, meeting her eye to eye. "No, you're not," I said. "You've been left here. You're not fine." She shifted uncomfortably, like she was trying to find some ground to stand on. But there was nothing. The look on her face was almost defeated. "I'm fine," she repeated, quieter this time, almost like she was trying to convince herself. I could hear Marissa's soft steps behind me and Zoe's faint murmurs, but I didn't turn around. This wasn't about them, not yet. I helped my mom slowly rise, steadying her as she got to her feet. She didn't seem to have much strength left, the way she swayed as she stood. I could feel the weight of her frailty, the hollow shell of a woman who used to be sharp and strong. I guided her toward the car, Marissa and Zoe trailing behind, careful not to crowd her. We made it to the SUV, and I helped her in, settling her into the seat like she was made of glass. The moment she was inside, I closed the door softly, and without a word, I turned to the team. "Let's go," I said quietly, my tone steady but firm. "Follow me." I climbed into the driver's seat, starting the engine. Marissa and Zoe's car pulled out behind us, keeping a few lengths of distance between us. Nobody spoke. There was no need for words. The drive was slow, deliberate. I didn't want to rush this. I didn't want to push my mom too hard, but I couldn't let this moment slip by unnoticed either. There was no going back from this. Whatever happened next, it had to be done with purpose. It wasn't about rushing her to safety. It was about sending the message to my parents, about making them realize how far they'd gone, how much damage they'd caused, and I wouldn't let them forget it. Not this time. We pulled up in front of my parents' house, the headlights of our vehicles cutting through the dark, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. The engines cut off one by one, the sudden silence hanging heavy in the air. The soft click of car doors echoed in the quiet neighborhood, and I could see the first few curious faces peeking from behind windows. Word would spread fast. Neighbors never missed anything. I glanced over at Marissa and Zoe, who were already stepping out of their car and forming a loose perimeter, keeping their distance, but close enough to be visible. No need for words. They knew exactly what was going down. I opened my door, the cool air hitting me as I stood up. For a moment, I let myself just take in the house, the place where my parents had spent so many years hiding behind their image of perfection, pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. Not anymore. I started walking toward the front door, my heels clicking sharply against the pavement. My mother was still in the back of the SUV, her face hidden from view, but I knew she was watching, and I could feel the weight of her silence pressing down on me. This wasn't just for her. This was for everyone who had to sit quietly by while they were treated like an afterthought. I reached the door and knocked firmly, no hesitation. The sound echoed through the house, and I could already hear the shuffle of footsteps on the other side. The door creaked open, and there he was, my father, looking groggy and disheveled, his robe hanging loosely around his shoulders. His eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. The cars, the quiet, the people standing in the yard. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rough with sleep, but rising in volume as he registered what was happening. His confusion turned to irritation, but there was no mistaking the hint of fear in his eyes. I stood there, tall and unyielding, the cold air biting at my face. "You left Mom at a park bench in the cold," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension. No room for excuses. His face faltered for a second, just a flicker of guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by frustration. "What? That's not what happened." I didn't let him finish. "Don't try to explain. Not now. There's no excuse for this. You left her there, alone." You let her sit in the cold, waiting for you to remember she even existed. He stammered, something about misunderstandings, about how he didn't know she was in that condition, but his words were weak, almost pathetic. Every excuse he tried to offer just made him look smaller. I don't care about your excuses, I snapped. You didn't care enough to be there when she needed you. That's the problem, Dad. You and Mom both. I've watched it for years. You've both been so absorbed in your own lives that you forgot what family even means. He opened his mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, silencing him. Number this ends now. You're going to face the consequences of your actions. You don't just abandon someone like that and expect it to go unnoticed. His face hardened, but he didn't speak. He was processing it now, maybe for the first time ever, really hearing what I was saying. Behind me, I could feel the weight of Marissa and Zoe's presence, like a silent statement that I wasn't alone in this, that the stakes were higher than his simple explanations. From the car, my mother watched the scene unfold in complete silence. She hadn't said a word since we left the park. I could see her reflection in the window, the faint outline of her face barely visible. I could only imagine how she felt seeing the two of us like this. She didn't look relieved or even comforted, just resigned. Neighbors were starting to gather in their windows now, a couple of them peeking out from behind curtains, trying to understand what was going on. The street was no longer quiet. There were whispers, a few heads turning as they caught sight of the scene playing out in front of my parents' home. My father finally took a step back, as if he was trying to process everything I'd just said. He looked toward the window, probably sensing my mother still in the car, and his posture softened for a second, just a second. Then he spoke, his voice quieter. This isn't how things should have gone. No, I agreed coldly. This isn't how anything should have gone. He stood there, unsure of what to do, his gaze flicking back to me, then to the crowd of neighbors who were now watching. His embarrassment was palpable. This wasn't just a family argument. This was public. It was out in the open, and he couldn't hide behind his usual indifference. I took a step back, and without looking at him again, I said, "Apologize, now to Mom, in front of everyone." The words hung in the air, the command clear. He hesitated, his mouth opening and closing like he was struggling to find something to say. But there was nothing left. There was no more room for pride or denial. Slowly, my father walked toward the car, his feet heavy on the gravel. He stopped at the window, his hand hovering for a moment before he knocked on it. My mother didn't respond. She just stared out at the street. "Mom," he said, his voice flat. "I'm sorry." His apology was weak, insincere, forced. It didn't carry any weight, and I could see it in his face. He was trying to get through it, to make it disappear, but it wasn't going to be that easy. I stepped forward, making sure everyone could hear me. This isn't just an apology. This is about acknowledging what you've done. You failed her. You both failed her. He didn't argue this time. He just stood there, hands shoved into his robe pockets, staring at the ground. The neighbors, however, were still watching. The whispers were louder now, and I knew that my father wouldn't be able to escape this moment. Not now. Not anymore. I took a slow step back from my father, turning my attention to the growing crowd of neighbors, now clearly gathered outside, peeking through their windows, some even standing on their porches. The quiet street was alive with whispers, people sizing up the situation, trying to piece together what was happening. I felt their eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. I focused on my father, still standing by the car, looking down at his feet. His shoulders were slumped, the weight of the moment finally hitting him. I wasn't going to let this slide. I addressed the crowd, my voice steady, but loud enough for them to hear. This isn't just about what happened tonight. This is about the years of neglect, the way they've treated family like it doesn't matter, the way they've allowed things to get to this point. I looked at my father again, then at my mother's reflection in the car window, barely visible. "You need to hear this too, Dad. You can't hide anymore." He didn't move, still rooted to the spot like he was waiting for me to give him an out. I crossed my arms, waiting, letting the silence hang in the air for a moment. "You're going to go outside," I said, my tone calm but sharp, "and you're going to apologize, not just to Mom, but to everyone watching this. To everyone who's ever been forced to stay silent while you and Mom treated family like an inconvenience." His face twitched. I could see his jaw tightening, and I knew he didn't want to do it. He wanted to hide, to deflect, to pretend this wasn't happening, but the moment had already passed. There was no turning back. "You can't make this go away by just slinking back inside," I continued. "You humiliated her tonight, and you're going to own it in front of all of us. His gaze flicked to the neighbors, to the quiet faces in the windows, their eyes wide with curiosity but also judgment. He was caught. You can't just pretend this didn't happen, I repeated, louder now. You don't get to erase the truth by hiding in your house, not anymore. For a long beat, he didn't respond. His chest rose and fell, but he stayed frozen, like he was battling with himself. I could see the internal struggle, the desire to just close the door and pretend everything was fine, but also the reality that things were already out in the open. Slowly, he turned and walked back toward the house. My heart beat faster. He wasn't going to do it. He was going to shut the door, and that would be that. But he didn't. He stepped out onto the porch, standing on the edge like a man who suddenly didn't know how to fit into the world anymore. He stared down at the street, at the neighbors who had come out to see what was going on. The once quiet block was now buzzing with whispers, and I could feel the weight of it all, the public exposure, the truth finally breaking through. My father stood there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, unsure of how to move, how to make this right. The last of the evening light was fading, the streetlights flickering to life one by one, but nothing about it felt peaceful. It felt heavy. Dad, I said, stepping forward, I need you to say the words. To Mom, in front of everyone. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing back at me. I could feel the heat of his embarrassment, the way he wished he could just disappear. But I wasn't going to let him off easy. Not now. The crowd was still watching. Some of the neighbors had gathered more openly now, leaning out of their windows, the occasional phone held up to capture the scene. His mouth opened and closed, his face flushed with shame. And then he muttered the words, barely audible. I'm sorry. It was so flat, so hollow, that it almost felt worse than nothing at all. It wasn't an apology. It was just a way for him to get through the moment, to try and quiet the storm. I didn't let him off the hook. I couldn't. Is that it? I asked, my voice a mix of disbelief and anger. That's all you've got? I'm sorry. He looked up at me, his face pained. What else do you want from me? An apology isn't just about words. It's about understanding the weight of what you've done. It's about realizing that you failed your own family. I let the words land, making sure the neighbors could hear it too. I wanted them to know. This wasn't just about a mistake. This was about a pattern of neglect, a pattern of emotional abandonment. My father swallowed hard, his face red now, the weight of the truth starting to sink in. But he didn't say anything. He didn't step forward and take ownership of his actions. He just stood there, like a man who had no idea how to make it right. You don't get to just apologize and walk away, I added, shaking my head. This doesn't just go away because you mutter a few words. You've let this go on for years, and now you have to live with it. The crowd was still silent, but I could see their eyes on him. I could feel the judgment, the realization that they were witnessing something they probably never thought they'd see, the unraveling of the perfect image my parents had so carefully constructed. I turned away from my father and looked back at the SUV. My mother's face remained hidden behind the tinted windows. She didn't need to hear his apology. She didn't need to hear him try to sweep this under the rug. Let's go, I said quietly to Marissa and Zoe, the words clear in the stillness. We didn't need to stay any longer. I turned and started walking back to the car, my heart heavy, but my resolve clear. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But at least now, they knew. Everyone knew. The next morning, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the scene at my parents' house, the hollow apology from my father, the way he stood there in front of the neighbors, small, powerless. But it wasn't enough. It never would be. I couldn't let it end there. I had already decided what I was going to do. The city council meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. I knew my parents would be there. They always showed up, part of some community projects they liked to flaunt, their way of maintaining the perfect, polished image. They couldn't escape that today. I wasn't going to let them hide. I dressed in the same sharp blazer I'd worn the night before, professional, clean, and to the point. But there was a weight in my chest, a steady pressure that only increased as I walked into the city hall. The usual chatter from the crowd filled the space, but it all seemed muted to me. I was focused on the podium, on what I had to say. When the meeting started, the mayor went through the usual formalities. I could hear the rustling behind me as people took their seats. I wasn't the only one who had a reason to be there today. But my eyes kept flicking toward my parents, sitting in the back row, their posture rigid, as if they could make themselves invisible. My father had a newspaper open in front of him, though he wasn't reading it. My mother was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, eyes glued to the floor. I didn't care about them trying to blend in, not anymore. I raised my hand when the public forum portion of the meeting began, and when they called my name, I walked to the podium, feeling the eyes of the room on me. Good afternoon, I started, my voice steady, but the weight of the moment pressing down on me. My name is Protagonist's name, and I'm here to talk about something that happened last night. It's about a family matter, but it's bigger than that. It's about what happens when we allow things to go unchecked for too long. I paused, glancing back at the back row where my parents sat. The silence in the room was thick, heavy. I could feel the tension ripple through the crowd. My mother worked multiple jobs. She sacrificed for this family. And my father, he remained distant, silent, detached. For as long as I can remember, we've all been living in their shadows, their perfect image. But last night, something changed. Last night, I had to go pick up my mother from a park bench in the cold because they, my parents, dropped her off there and told her to figure it out. No phone call, no help, no nothing. I let the words hang in the air for a moment, making sure everyone understood the gravity of it. I could feel the heat of my parents' shame from the back of the room, but I wasn't about to let them control the narrative, not anymore. To those of you who know my parents, who have seen them at these meetings, participating in community projects, I ask you, when did we stop seeing each other as people? When did we start accepting this kind of neglect in the name of appearances? My mother was treated like an afterthought, like she was disposable. She's not disposable. None of us are. I glanced over my shoulder at my parents. My father's face was flushed now, and my mother still hadn't looked up. I felt a brief surge of satisfaction, but I couldn't lose focus. I wasn't done yet. I don't just want an apology, I want accountability for what happened to my mother, for what's been allowed to happen for years. The values we claim to hold, community, respect, those need to mean something. We can't keep hiding behind facades, pretending everything is fine when people are being left behind. I took a breath, my eyes sweeping across the room, taking in the faces of the audience. The mayor was sitting at the front, looking uncomfortable, his hands folded in front of him. His gaze flickered toward my parents, then back to me. These are the values we hold dear in this community, right? So why are we allowing this to happen? Why do we keep tolerating behavior like this, pretending that no one's being hurt? I let my voice rise, just enough to make my point clear. This isn't just a family issue. It's a community issue. Because if we don't hold ourselves accountable, what does that say about us? About all of us? There was a brief moment of silence. Then the mayor cleared his throat, his voice breaking through the tension. Thank you for your comments. We understand your concerns. The town values everyone, and I'm sure we can find ways to address these issues going forward. On behalf of the community, I apologize for any distress this has caused you or your family. The apology was soft, vague, and utterly meaningless. I could see the mayor trying to wrap things up quickly, trying to brush it off as if he could make this go away with a few well-meaning words. But I wasn't done. I took a step closer to the microphone, my hand resting lightly on it, steadying myself. An apology isn't enough, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the room. An apology doesn't fix the years of neglect. It doesn't fix the broken trust. We need real change. We need to hold people accountable, my parents included. The mayor shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable, but I wasn't backing down. The crowd was silent now, but I could feel their eyes on me, a mix of discomfort and understanding. My parents are part of this town's leadership, but they're also human, and humans make mistakes. But that doesn't mean we should just let them off the hook. It's time for all of us to do better. For the sake of those who are left behind, I stepped back from the podium, the room still buzzing with the weight of my words. I could feel the eyes of the room on me, but I stood tall. I had said what needed to be said. The mayor cleared his throat again, but it was clear that the moment had passed. There was no easy way to undo what had just happened. The truth was out. I turned, walking back toward my seat, my heart pounding, but a sense of relief washing over me. I had done what I came here to do. I had forced them all to confront the truth. Parents, community, everyone. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I had taken the first step toward real change. The next morning, I drove my grandmother to a small cafe on the edge of town, just the two of us. The sun was barely up, but the place was already starting to wake. The smell of fresh coffee in the air as I parked outside. Grandma had been quiet ever since the city council meeting, but there was something different about her today. A peace, maybe, or maybe it was just the quiet after the storm. We walked inside, and she smiled at the waitress behind the counter, a soft, genuine smile that felt like it had been buried for years. We sat down in a booth by the window, the sunlight spilling across the table. I ordered coffee for both of us and a small breakfast, just eggs and toast, simple and comforting. Grandma took a deep breath, looking out the window at the street. I never thought I'd see the day, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion, but not sadness. It was something else, something lighter. You've always had a fire in you, haven't you, darling? I didn't respond right away. I just watched her. For the first time in a long time, she looked relaxed, not tense, not worried, just at peace. I could tell it was good for her to be out, to be somewhere she wasn't constantly reminded of what had happened. For a moment, it felt like she could finally breathe again. We sat in silence as the waitress brought over our food. Grandma smiled, picking up her fork. She took a bite and sighed. I'm glad we're here. It's been too long since we've had a morning like this. I nodded, focusing on my own coffee, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things had started to change. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but I'd made it clear to everyone, especially my parents, that they couldn't get away with what they'd done. I wasn't just protecting Grandma now. I was protecting what was left of the family that had tried to make it work, even when no one else did. As we ate, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from an unfamiliar number, followed by a letter attachment. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. It was from my mother's sister, my aunt. She acknowledged everything that had happened, admitted that they'd all made mistakes, and in the simplest, most direct words, she asked for a chance to make things right. The letter wasn't much. It was an apology, sure, but it felt like the kind of apology that was looking for an easy way out. The kind of apology that wasn't really about accountability, but about getting things back to normal, on their terms. I didn't respond, not yet at least. I put the phone down and focused back on my grandmother. That was where my attention needed to be. She had her dignity back, and that was the most important thing. The neighborhood would buzz about the city council meeting, about the spectacle of the previous night, but I didn't care. The truth had been exposed. My parents had been forced to face it, and they would have to live with the consequences of their actions. For now, it was just me and Grandma. And I was going to make sure that for the rest of her days, no one treated her like she was invisible ever again.